Thanks for joining us on another episode of Environment Matters on the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. Our focus on this episode is on the United Nations 7th Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, hosted by the government of Indonesia in the beautiful Nusa Dua of Bali. My name is Onengiye, find disaster-prone countries of the world with a series of earthquakes, sometimes accompanied by tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, wildfires destroying millions of hectares of land, rainstorms, coastal erosion, and floods. Now, despite this high level of vulnerability, the country has managed to bring its disaster risk profile to minimum levels. For instance, the country has reduced forest fires by 86%, reduced hotspots by 95%, restored 3.4 million hectares of peatlands, and is projecting mangrove forest restoration to 600,000 hectares by 2024. These indicators of resilience and determination to reduce risks associated with disasters makes Indonesia an example of innovative solutions to natural hazards.
We are on a fast track to climate disaster. Major cities underwater, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages, the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals. And this is not fiction or exaggeration. Climate scientists warn that we are already perilously close to tipping points that could lead to cascading and irreversible climate impacts. This is a climate emergency.
Climate disasters and hazards, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, are a wake-up call that business as usual is over. The world can no longer turn a blind eye to risk or the cascading impacts of disasters on the world's most vulnerable countries and people. Disaster risk reduction is about ensuring development succeeds, people are protected, and that no one is left behind. This is the moment and this is the place where the world gathers to take a stand. Now is the time to move from risk to resilience. Welcome to the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction.
The Global Platform takes place at a critical time, 7 years after the adoption of the Sendai Framework and just over 2 years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. This global crisis has exposed how underlying vulnerabilities and inequalities have catastrophic consequences across the world. Prevention and the risk reduction agenda are essential if the world is to achieve a sustainable future for all. The 2022 Global Platform provides a unique and timely opportunity to showcase the importance of international solidarity and cooperation, as well as discusses ways to tackle underlying risk drivers, both locally and globally. Additionally, it explores how to strengthen disaster risk governance and how to build stronger systems for managing all types of risks. Codenamed GP 2022, the program opened a chance for governments, United Nations systems, and all stakeholders to recommit with urgency to accelerate progress on disaster risk reduction towards the achievement of sustainable development. More than 7,000 participants from 180 countries registered for the event, with more than 70% attending in person, including ministerial level representation from more than 31 countries and 250 persons living with disabilities.
Harmony of biodiversity destroyed, birthing climate crisis and crying faces.
Dicey situation indeed, yet we carry on like a bull in a china shop.
On Environment Matters, we take the bull by the horns, comb the nooks and cranny of Nigeria.
Asking tough questions.
Examining challenges and opportunities.
Giving human face to the science, facts, facts, and global agreements. It's a call for action. Don't miss it.
Join award-winning environmental journalist Jennifer Igwe and other NTA Eco reporters for Environment Matters.
The Nusa Dua, Bali, beyond its renowned status as a tourist destination of choice, became a meeting ground for national delegations, the private sector, civil society organizations, global media representatives, and other stakeholders to discuss and share experiences on reducing disaster risks from hazards, guided by the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030.
A round of applause, please, for the dancers. The welcome dance of Asmara Dana.
Here, in the long-forgotten valley of your youth, visitors come not of their own accord, but by necessity. Abdul Ghani and his Zahara sink their fingers into the mud of me, saplings cling, and I am whole again.
Emitital Mahmoud. Thank you.
An elaborate opening ceremony displaying the rich cultural, tourist, and resilient spirit of Indonesia set the stage for what turned out to be a defining moment to build momentum for global action with the theme "From Risk to Resilience Towards Sustainable Development for All in a COVID-19 Transformed World."
We are convening this global platform at a very challenging time, to say the least. Disasters have always been a plight, but we are now living in the aftermath of a disaster, the scale of which the world has not seen in many decades. It has upended conventional understandings of risk and what it means to manage disaster risks. All the while, drivers of risk that existed before the pandemic have only grown stronger. Climate change, environmental degradation, and unplanned urban growth continue unabated. At the same time, human vulnerability is at all-time high due to increasing poverty, inequality, and the erosion of human rights. This threatens the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals and all global agreements for a resilient future. But there is hope and opportunity, and our gathering here today in Indonesia is proof that humanity has not given up. We must seize this moment to transform how we view the managed risks. Together, through solidarity and partnerships, we can tackle the common risks that threaten us. Let us leave no one behind and emerge stronger and more resilient.
This is the first global platform since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. It takes place as global crises are multiplying, with the devastating effects particularly on the poorest and the most vulnerable. People around the world are experiencing the impact of the climate emergency on a daily basis. The war in Ukraine is contributing to sky-high food, rocketing prices and energy prices with serious implications for the global financial system. At the same time, we face the constant threat of other disasters too. If things continue as they are, we will experience a 1.5 medium to large-scale disasters every single day by 2030. As it stands, disasters are already wreaking havoc in our efforts towards attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Our decisions and actions can inadvertently influence our risk and exposure. This 7th session of the Global Platform, under the theme, From Risk to Resilience, towards sustainable development for all in a COVID-19 transformed world, therefore takes on additional significance. We have a unique opportunity to consider the best policy options to move from risk to resilience and to take important steps to ensure that the recovery from COVID-19 puts us back on track for a safe and sustainable future. The 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals provide us with a comprehensive framing. But we need to act with a sense of urgency, and we need to act at scale.
If there's one thing that we have learned from COVID-19, as well as from the ongoing climate crisis, it is that it is those who are the furthest behind who suffer the hardest, who wait the longest, who are deprived of development gains that are far too often wiped away by whatever crisis that comes our way. Our recovery from the pandemic must reflect this knowledge. Excellencies, resilience must be our mantra. Every new building, every new social program, every budget and every initiative must be designed and executed in the way that reduces risk. It must be embedded into everything we do, from the very beginning and cross-checked at each step of the way.
Harmony of biodiversity destroyed, birthing climate crisis and crying faces.
Dicey situation indeed, yet we carry on like a bull in a china shop.
On Environment Matters, we take the bull by the horns, comb the nooks and cranny of Nigeria.
Asking tough questions.
Examining challenges and opportunities.
Giving human face to the science, facts, fits, and global agreements. It's a call for action. Don't miss it.
Join award-winning environmental journalist Jennifer Igwe and other NTA Eco reporters for Environment Matters.
And it's not just about ecosystem conservation and restoration. It's also about effectively working with people in a way that addresses the drivers of risk.
How we can scale up the good practices of using nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation under different contexts.
Every dollar invested in mangroves, you avert $9 worth of damage. This ratio was $8 for gabions and only $2 for sea dikes.
Our approach is actually using ecosystems and biodiversity value chains, especially on the non-timber forest products that are available in these communities as their own critical natural capital.
Several sessions and meetings discussed other key thematic areas, including global and regional perspectives on implementing the Sendai framework, diversity in disaster risk reduction leadership, improved understanding and governance of systemic risk, unpacking the 2022 Global Assessment Report, from DRR strategies to our investments, key to successful implementation of the Sendai framework, building resilience in complex emergencies when conflict, climate change, and COVID collide. Ministerial roundtable on scaling up disaster risk reduction to tackle the climate emergency, implementing nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction, multi-hazard early warning systems, among others.
Say 20, 30 years ago, a weather forecaster would issue a weather forecast or issue a warning and his job was done, or their job was done. Now we want to make sure that that forecast reaches the last mile, that it reaches the most remote populations, no matter where you're located in the world.
Ultimately, there has to be a model which is more connected to local systems, local financing, and the avoided damage and loss and the local value. So we're trying to improve that model.
Why does an individual take a decision to remain in a coastal region where there is anticipated storm surge, for example? So there are a lot of social and cultural considerations. I think there's a need for greater investment in the behavioral science and really understanding what drives persons to make specific decisions.
What I would call competing priorities. We have ongoing disasters that we have to deal with. And over time, these ongoing disasters overtake, preparedness and risk reduction activity.
Curious about how government policies on healthcare are faring? Do you enjoy learning about wellness concept and the many options available? Then watch Health Options on the NTA.
Mr. President has led by example. Take the COVID-19 vaccine.
Somebody can say, hey, I woke up this morning, I felt some tingling in my hand, some weakness, my face I couldn't speak well. That's a warning stroke, and it shouldn't be ignored.
The carrots contains carotene. Tomatoes is a colored plant. It has carotene. Pepper has carotene.
50% of our diet should be green vegetables and fruits.
Join leading experts on both orthodox and alternative medicine for all the enlightenment you need for a healthier you.
Thanks for joining us on the program. I am Rabi Abdullah.
The Africa Regional Meeting presented a declaration of commitment derived from the Nairobi Declaration to the global platform. Commitment from African countries include ramping up financing for disaster risk reduction, improving governance and political will to implement policies, community engagement in disaster risk reduction programs, among others.
The financing must take care of all the risk reduction requirements of our communities in our various countries. We know that if it is a question of financing, then it must have some legal framework.
Also, even in terms of resources or resource mobilization, we also look at domestic resource mobilization, and we can be able also to fund some of the activities from within the continent.
Now, persons living with disabilities also made a case for inclusive implementation of the Sendai framework, bearing in mind the fact that limited abilities increases their vulnerabilities during disaster events.
So there is a lot of need to ensure that the state really have the necessary capacity so that they can bring in persons with disabilities, they can bring in indigenous communities from rural parts, they can bring in women, because at all the time, these are the group that has been left behind in many of the engagement.
Persons with disability are left out on a process, in the planning process,
preparedness process. So most of them are mostly the most vulnerable when it comes to disaster. We are talking about the COVID-19 coupled with the crisis.
But we need more. We need more policies. We need more measures taken. We need more meaningful participation on it. And we need developing countries to help other countries in order to get funding.
Nigeria had cheery news at the platform with implementing partners of the Continental Early Warning System in Africa, indicating that work on a regional center will begin in June 2022 in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, to be completed in November the same year.
What will be the next step of this program is to complete this network with other 3 centers. One that will be realized this year for the ECOWAS, so in the western part of Africa. And then 2 others in the next year, we hope in the next couple of years, one for the Central Africa and one for the SADC Africa. In order to have all this network that will cover Africa with the early warning system that should be timely and coming from authoritative sources.
Outcomes of the 7th Global Platform include consolidated stocktake on Sendai framework implementation, progress by member states and shareholders, and achievement of disaster risk-related targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. That's it on this episode of the program. Thank you for watching. Join NTA for another interesting outing on environment matters, because for the NTA, the environment matters indeed. I'm Onengie Fineface, your host. Bye-bye.